Hi and welcome to this revision session on tropical storms. Tropical storms appear in Unit 1 in the physical paper as part of the natural hazards section, and they are within the weather hazards parts of this topic. If you remember, UK extreme weather is also in that section, but is significantly different. So extreme weather in the UK, when we looked at the beast from the east, that's separate. We sometimes students mix these up and get them confused. So if you see the words tropical storms, you know that you're dealing with something different. We're not talking about the UK. Okay, so let's get started. Here's a map of the world with some key lines of latitude. So let's just remind ourselves what they are. The line in the middle at 0 degrees is the equator, and that's a line of latitude, and because the numbers are low, that's low latitudes. We've got the tropic of, I'll just move these a little bit. We've got the Tropic of Cancer at the top there, and underneath the Tropic of Capricorn. Okay, so those are the key lines here. The area between these we call the tropics. So the fact that we're talking about tropical storms tells us something about where we're going to see these storms occurring, and obviously it's very likely to be between these lines. Now we're up here in the UK, so it's very unlikely that we will have a tropical storm up in the UK. Okay, so if we just have a look, we're going to label these oceans. So the Atlantic Ocean is between Europe and North America. If we look, remember the country here is India, so that ocean there is the Indian Ocean. And on the other side of the North and South America is the Pacific. And this one here is also the Pacific, the other side of, because obviously this is a sphere and these two join at the back, if we curled the paper around as it should be really. So tropical storms will occur in 3 oceans. The Southern Ocean down here won't be affected, it's not in the tropics. The Arctic Ocean at the top won't be affected, but the Pacific here, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific again will be affected. So if I take a suitable tropical storm colour, let's choose one that will stand out. I'm going to go with blue because they're only in the ocean. That's where they form. They do go on to land, but they die out quite quickly. So in the Atlantic, we give them different names. In the Atlantic Ocean, these storms will form near to the equator, and then because of the rotation of the Earth, they actually will move up or down. And in the Atlantic, we call these hurricanes. Okay, so if you hear of a hurricane, it's going to be in the Atlantic Ocean, or possibly just to the very, very east of the Pacific Ocean. So again, these are hurricanes. Okay, they form on the ocean and they'll hit the coast here. And we're very used to hearing about Florida or the Caribbean tragically being affected, or even the east coast of Mexico and so on. So this is hurricane area. If it's affecting the Americas, it's hurricanes. In the Indian Ocean, we have again tropical storms forming, and their tracks then tend to be in these kinds of directions. Again, it's because the Earth is spinning, so they move that way. And here, these storms are called cyclones. Okay, cyclones, tropical cyclones. So we've got hurricanes here, cyclones here, and over in the Western Pacific, we call these storms which come in like this and like this. So we call these here typhoons. Typhoons. So typhoons are tropical storms affecting the Western Pacific. Cyclones are tropical storms affecting the Indian Ocean. And near to the Americas, they're called hurricanes, mainly in the Atlantic, but also on this side of the Pacific. Now, in the exam, you're not going to be asked to label a map up like that, but they may ask you where they occur. So you need to be remembering that they're occurring between the tropics. They form over the oceans, not on land. And they do have different names in different places. Okay, so that's where they are. Let's have a look at why they happen. So, first of all, you need some ocean, and it needs to be 27 degrees centigrade or more. Now, what happens at this point is the water in the ocean starts to be evaporated, so the water vapour is above the ocean. Now, warm air, as you know, rises. You've been learning that from primary school. Think of the water cycle. So that warm air rises. Now, as the warm air rises, it will start to form clouds, and because as you move up, it gets colder. So we get condensation. So we've got evaporation. We've got warm air rising. It rises up, carrying the water vapour with it. Condensation, because as you go up a mountain, it gets colder. That's why mountaineers wear woolly hats. And it cools and it condenses, and the water turns into droplets which all join together to make clouds, and eventually you get rain. Now that is the water cycle. It is convectional rainfall, and that's what's happening. Now, because the water is so warm, it's making this happen very quickly, very, very quickly. And over time, what may happen over time is that you may get a tropical storm starting. Now, what happens there is, as that's all going on, the storm starts to rotate, to spin, due to Earth's rotation. Okay. Posh phrase, Coriolis effect. So we get this spinning storm happening, and as it's spinning, the warm air's rising, but the warm air's turning as it goes up, so it's almost like a helter-skelter, but back to front. So you have these large storms form. Like what I'm drawing now is great big towering thunderstorms. There's your ocean. There's your rising air, so the air's rising up, and it's kind of rising in a sort of spinning way. Okay, so this whole system is spinning around. Now the bit in the middle is called the eye, and the eye is calm, and it has blue sky. There's no cloud in the middle. So if you were here looking up in a well-formed tropical storm, you'd see a circle of blue sky above you. You'd feel very, very heavy rain under the clouds. So there's heavy rain here and heavy rain here. But here, no rain. Now the edge of the storm is called the eye wall, and that's where the strongest winds are. And obviously in a very strong Category 5 storm, incredibly fast moving winds here, up towards 200 miles an hour. The air is rising here, so our 27 degrees C plus ocean, and it's very low pressure. So if you remember the idea of air pressure can push down on you and be high pressure, or if the air's rising, it's not pushing down, it's low pressure. And obviously winds rush in to fill that gap. So key points to remember here. There's an eye, which is calm. If we looked from above, we'd see something that would almost look like that if we're looking down from above. And there we'd be able to see this, whatever through it. We'd be able to see straight down to the surface. This is a spinning, whirling mass of clouds. This is in cross-section through the middle. The eye, calm. Great big towering cumulonimbus clouds. That's what this shape is. Great big clouds, great big towering thunderstorm clouds. The spinning air's rising, very low pressure. warm ocean. Now, what will happen as the oceans warm? This is another key point in your GCSE. So, climate change. So the words you may see in the exam are the impacts of climate change. What are they? Number one, if we've got storms currently in these locations, because the ocean there is getting to 27 degrees centigrade, in the future, maybe new areas will become warmer. So maybe we'll see storms forming in slightly newer locations further north or further south than we previously have. So number one, new areas have tropical storms. And that's basically as they reach 27 degrees C plus for the first time. Number two, what about these storms? Think of a pot of water on the stove. If you turn the gas up, or if you turn the electric up, you turn the power up, it bubbles faster. So if you turn up the temperature, if this temperature here is 28, 29, goes up in temperature, the storm will be stronger. So storms become more intense, and there's a lot of evidence for that happening. So storms may become more intense. And third, the one that most people go to is we'll get more storms. So you could say increased frequency. Now, you have to look at this because the evidence is mixed on this one. We are definitely seeing more storms, more intense storms, more category 5s. Remember, category 1 is the lowest, and then it goes up to a category 5, which is the most destructive. Category 1, bits of people's roofs are flying off, trees may be uprooted, 75-ish mile an hour winds, sustained, not gusts, up to category 5, where whole houses are being ripped apart, all of the power supplies are out, massive flooding. Okay. Right, that's the impacts of climate change. Now we're going to come on to effects in the next video, but I'm just keen to share a few key points. Now, number one, if we put here the main risks, there are 3 main risks from any tropical storm. The first one, have a think, begins with W, is wind. Okay, so there's a real risk of flying debris, it's buildings destroyed. So there's a massive risk from that. The wind, particularly in the eyeball, remember that's the fastest wind. Secondly, flooding on land. So when the storm makes landfall, when it hits land, incredibly strong, incredibly heavy rain. So rain goes into the rivers, or we may have flash flooding, and that can lead to major flooding. Okay. Third one, what is it? It's a storm surge, and this is where it'll look like a tsunami wave sometimes. So literally the storm pushes the water up onto the land. So this is flooding from the sea. And that can be particularly devastating if you've got your sea level and quite flat land, as was the case with Typhoon Haiyan. And the water was pushed in on land, and that can go on over a very large distance. So low-lying land is a real problem with the storm surge. Equally, if your buildings are not very strongly constructed, because it's a lower-income country, that also is going to have a devastating effect. So 3 main risks from the sea. One last point to make before we finish this video. What happens when they reach land? So a really common question in the exam is about when the storm hits land. So the storm's coming in from the sea, it hits land, and it comes, if I do a sort of storm there, we go with the eye in the middle, so that wouldn't be there and that wouldn't be there. In it comes, storm, big storm surge. As it hits land, when it gets here, it will start to lose energy, and there are two reasons why that might be. The biggest one is that it's now on the land, which is much cooler. So it starts to lose energy because it no longer has heat energy from the sea. Okay, number one. Number two, friction from the land. So if it's going over mountains or hills, that friction will stop it moving. And this is called when it makes landfall. And that means when it hits land. Okay, so that gives you everything you need to know about what happens when it hits land, the main risks, the impacts of climate change, the key words, reasons for formation, and where we find them. Okay, there'll be other links below.